So T.S. Eliot is not my favorite poet, but he wrote some words that I thought were relevant to this conversation today. He said, "Where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information?" It's funny because these terms seem so modern, yet they were written 80 plus years ago. Now, I guess if they were written today, there'd probably be something about those darn millennials staring at their smartphones all the time. Maybe something about data. Actually, definitely something about data, because we live in the data age. You've heard all the statistics. 90% of the world's data was created in just the last 2 years. We talk about petabytes and zettabytes, big data, small data, open data, data-driven decisions. But people often lose track of the meaning of the words that we're throwing around, because at the end of the day, information is not data. Data is not information. Knowledge is different entirely. So even when people realize this, they still want to structure it. They want to understand how they can simplify these different things. And they often think about, okay, so we start with data, and then from there, data flows into information, and the data flows into information. That then flows into knowledge, and then the knowledge, we get insights from that, right? And then life's great. We go sit on the beach, throw on our Ray-Bans. Life is so good because we just tapped into that data, that information, that knowledge, and we fixed everything. But in the real world, anyone here that works with data, information, and knowledge understands it looks a lot more like this. It's messy. It's complicated. It's jumbled. And even when we get some insights, we're worried, we're concerned, because we know there are asymmetries, and we know we might be missing something. So we end up looking a lot more like this. And we just don't know. But there's a better way to do this. We don't have to stick with the status quo. We don't have to stick with something that's not working. We can figure out, as Brian Ford was talking about just a few minutes ago, a better approach, Open Data 2.0. How can we create a data ecosystem and a culture of open data, open knowledge, and open information, so that we are sharing, not just waiting for government to share with us in a waterfall, one-way broadcast approach, but we're actually participating in this open data ecosystem. So that's what we're going to talk about today, because I think, that can leave us looking like this. So this is why we created something called the Civic Graph, because we believe this is possible. So we worked with folks at the GovLab in Brooklyn. We worked with folks at Andela in Lagos, Nigeria. And together we created a platform that allows all of us to contribute our knowledge, to contribute what we know, so that together we can have resources that help the many with the knowledge that previously was held by the few. And isn't that what we've been talking about these last couple days? Isn't that what civic tech is all about? So with that, let's switch over to a quick demonstration of the tool itself. And this is the Civic Graph. The Civic Graph is an open knowledge base. It's running in the Azure cloud, but using a modern tech stack, so Node.js, D3. If any developers want to participate, please plug in. The code's all on GitHub. You can be a part of this. But for everyone else, there's a role to play too, because it's the knowledge that you have that makes this better. And what we're looking at right now is in red, you're seeing entities that are governments. In green, for-profits. Blue, nonprofits, and yellow, individuals. And this shows how they're connected to one another, because they're connected in a variety of ways. On the left side, you see investments and funding, collaborations, but also data. Who's using whose data? So this is a tool that is broadly available already, but we want to make sure that everybody knows it exists and participates in its growth. So if we want to look at one of the nodes in particular, say we want to look at Code for America. A lot of us know Code for America, very well respected, and we can click on it and quickly understand who they're working with and in what way. And say I actually really cared about who they're getting data from, then I could use the filter bar on the left side, uncheck the investing, the funding, the collaboration, and I could narrow down, oh, they're getting data from, and it says USDA, the US Department of Agriculture. So that's information that I didn't know until someone at Code for America put it in here. So this is the ability for us to share information asynchronously across time and space and help us grow this civic tech movement from something that has a few people that know a lot to something where many people can plug in and learn and get up to speed. Another way to look at this would be by location. So here's a quick example. Last fall, Minerva Tantoko was named as the first ever Chief Technology Officer of New York City. And she came in from the private sector to work with this civic tech community in New York. So you can quickly put in New York, and you can see this is the New York civic tech ecosystem. These are the people and the entities that are interacting, doing civic tech projects together. Now, it might be that when Minerva puts this in, she said, well, who's actually already working with the mayor's office? She's going to be in the mayor's office. She might want to know who's working with the mayor's office already. She can click on that and see, oh, well, I know a bunch of these big companies, sure, yeah. But, oh, the Flatiron School. Flatiron School is a coding boot camp here in New York. It's been getting a lot of attention, a lot of positive attention. So you might want to learn about that. And she can quickly see that one of the individuals that the Flatiron School is connected to is Kristen Titus. Now, Kristen Titus runs the mayor's tech talent pipeline here in New York. So just like that, in the matter of 60 seconds, Minerva can find people who can connect her in a way that might have taken weeks of meetings otherwise. So that is one way to look at the information, but it's not the only way. So if you want to look at the Flatiron School and learn more about that, the information on the, if we click on the Flatiron School again, it will give us the information about the Flatiron School on the right-hand side, who they collaborate with, who funds them, and the like. So if we switch over to the map view, we can look at this geographically. You might want to think about who's connected across New York to San Francisco. You can see here the intensity of civic tech activity in certain places, again, according to this data, which only gets better the more people contribute to it. And if we zoom in, you can see in New York City, you can see that there are these donut charts that look like this, and it shows the distribution of civic tech activity. So a lot of individuals, that's the yellow. Basically equal amounts of, that's Brooklyn, that gets its own, you know, if anyone here is from Brooklyn, you know Brooklyn's its own thing. So you see when you look at New York, though, when you look at New York, equal numbers essentially of nonprofits and for-profits, very few governments, very few red entities. But then if you want to look at Washington, D.C., we might expect, and this confirms, a very different situation. The plurality are governmental entities that are actually engaging in civic tech activity in DC. And that might lead to different decisions about how you approach partnering with civic tech organizations and projects in different places. So this is the map view. You can zoom in even further and get more granular detail. But what's great about all of this is not the visualization itself. It's the data underlying it. Because that's where the real value is, the fact that we're creating something that didn't exist before. And it's open. And anyone can go and grab the data in a JSON format from the API. And we decided to do exactly that. To take this data, you can look at the code on GitHub if you want to. You can grab the data from civicgraph.io itself. And you can take that and put it in anywhere you want. So you could put it into, for instance, Power BI, which is a data analytics tool at Microsoft, or you can put it in all kinds of third-party tools. So there's a startup out in San Francisco called Mapper. Mapper was started by some TED fellows last year. And what they do is cloud-based network visualizations to help people find the hidden meanings in their data. And this is what Mapper looks like, using the Civic Graph data. So it looks very different. We're looking at it in a different way. On the outside, you see what Mark Smith referred to as those islands. These are the groups that are unconnected. Now, it doesn't mean they're actually unconnected. It means the data is not there yet. And some of you might have the data to connect them, to bring them into the fold. And then in the middle, we can zoom in and take a look at these 5 networks that exist. There's one at the top that gets cut off a little bit. But essentially, you're looking at 5 different networks. At the top, essentially connected by Chicago. In purple, in the middle, you're looking at a lot of institutions that work across a number of different areas of civic tech. In green, that's mostly the State Department and Google connections. Yellow, lots of individuals who focus on openness. So Tim O'Reilly, no surprise, is in there. And in blue, and we can zoom in on this one, blue seems to be a corridor connecting New York City and Boston and Cambridge. So a northeast corridor of civic tech. And you can see a few key people here. People like Susan Crawford. People like Hillary Mason, like Anthony Townsend, and like Andrew McLaughlin. These are key people. These are cornerstones. These are keystones. I think the way Mark described it, these are hubs. These are hubs for this community. So together, these multiple communities make up our ecosystem of civic tech, but we can understand them by digging into who plays central roles in each of these communities. So here, you're looking at, as we mentioned, that Northeast corridor, but then we can see Tim O'Reilly and his role in the openness community. We can see Jared Cohen and his role in the Google State Department community, which makes a lot of sense if you know that he used to be at the State Department and now is at Google. And then up above, you might see something more interesting. The New York City Economic Development Corporation actually is very, very well connected in this, probably the most robust grouping that we see. And another one you might see is the NYU Centers for Urban Sciences and Progress, CUSP. So with that, we'll move on to the next slide and take a look at who's bridging. So we looked at who's central to each of these groups, but who's actually bridging amongst them? Who's creating that ecosystem out of these distinct communities? And you'll see a couple you might expect, things like Code for America, not surprising, with 140 brigades around the world. You'll also see the White House, also not surprising in its own way, since the White House should be working on all kinds of things across the country. But you'll see some that are a little bit less expected, things like the New York Tech Meetup. So the New York Tech Meetup, once a month, meets in this very auditorium. It's an organization with 45,000 members. You might think that it's only tech and entrepreneurship, but what this is showing is they're actually connected to a variety of actors and players and projects across the ecosystem. So we can look at this in different ways too. And actually one more we'll look at before we go is the Flatiron School. So this is something that I mentioned we could see in the Civic graph data, but when you apply Mapper to it, we can actually take a look at Flatiron School's network, not just of their direct connections, but also of their secondary connections. So to show who's in their orbit, even if they're not directly connected. And we can look at the data here in a different way. We can look at an XY axis if we want to. So what you're looking at here is at the upper left, you're looking at the people or organizations that are most central, that are those hubs for their communities. And at the right side, you're looking at the organizations that are the bridges. And at the upper left, again, not surprisingly, Tim O'Reilly. We talked about seeing him earlier. But what is interesting is that Tim O'Reilly, as a lot of you know, is incredibly involved and has been involved since prior to day one at Code for America. And Code for America is on the other end. Code for America is a bridge bringing this all together. So while Tim himself seems to be most involved in that openness community and what it leads to, Code for America has gone much broader. And those might be pretty expected. Those are fairly well-known individuals and entities in the space. But one that shows up here as a big bridge that we wouldn't have necessarily known about is Dr. Holly Rusin-Gilman. Dr. Gilman is at New America, where she's a Civic Innovation Fellow. And prior to this, she was in the White House. She was at Harvard. And this is the kind of thing that you can learn here. You can find out about somebody that you may or may not have known previously and learn quickly about what kind of work they're doing, who they're connected to, and find those insights that can be hidden in the data. So with that, let's go back to the slides. And this conference asks us to imagine the future of civic tech. But to do that well, to do it really, really well, we need to understand the present. And that's what tools like this allow us to do. Because as Brian mentioned, Open Data 2.0 is participatory. It's not one way, it's not broadcast. And we want all of us, all of you, to be a part of this movement by putting yourself on the map, by showing where you fit in and showing what you think can happen if we do this together. Thank you.